summertime.
Right.
But for a lot of Westport teenagers and their parents, the living is not easy. Schools to visit, essays to write, internships to do, all in preparation for college applications this fall, or the fall after for rising sophomores. The college process has been long and stressful for years, and lately I think it's even longer and more stressful. Diederik Van Renessee has spent years watching the college process evolve. He's a consultant with Steinbrecher Educational Advisors, founded by Phyllis Steinbrecher nearly 50 years ago.
Indeed.
Its experts have worked with college-bound students and those applying to grad school, boarding school, summer programs, therapeutic programs, all over the world. Diederik has seen a sea change in those processes, and we'll get to those soon. Thanks, Diederik, for being our guest on 06880, the podcast. And I guess the first question is, how do you get to be an educational consultant?
Well, I started actually in boarding school working as an assistant to the college counselor there, while I was also carrying on as director of admissions, and had a great mentor who had been doing college placement for many, many years. I think probably about 25 years before I joined him. So that was my start. And then when I joined Phyllis, many years later, when I finished working in boarding school, I found working as an independent consultant with another great mentor, being Phyllis. It was truly a natural to move both into the college counseling, but also the prep school counseling.
So what do you do? What does a educational consultant do?
Well, there's some that just specialize working on college placement. In our office, we have two people who do just that. Myself, I do the college placement. I also work with kids looking for boarding schools or family relocating to find appropriate public schools as well. I also, another part of my career has really focused on working with kids with special needs, kids in crisis, and working with therapeutic programs in schools.
Wow. So we'll get to the therapeutic part and the boarding schools.
We should not have to.
What's that?
I hope we don't have to.
But what can an educational consultant do that a school-based guidance counselor doesn't do or can't do?
Well, much credit must be given to the school guidance counselors, for they work often with many more kids than we do. I mean, I know college counselors that have as many as 100 kids to work with. We in our offices would work with much smaller numbers, which means we can give a great deal more personal attention. And that, I think, is what families ask for us. I mean, they want an individualized list of colleges that meets the needs of their particular child. And they also are looking for us to be working with the student, taking them through the steps of the application, the college search, the creation of a final list, and then the actual application process, working with them, making sure that everything is completed in the way that it should be. We guide them on the essays, we guide them on the supplements, and of course we also encourage them to visit colleges and guide them, if they are able to get interviews, on how to respond to interviews if they're lucky to have an interview.
So how's it changed? How has your job changed over the years?
I think the biggest change really has been that the colleges are seeing so many more applicants than they used to, and that it has become so much more competitive with so many more students from all over the world. I mean, I won't date myself of when I went to college, but I was, considered an international student because I grew up in Holland, although I had an American passport, and I was considered an international student, and I was one of 8 in my college freshman class. now the number of international students probably numbers anywhere from 10 to 25% in entering classes. So the competition from around the world has gotten so much greater, and which has made, the American university so much more competitive to get into. And the competition is very strong. I mean, these are strong students. These are not the weak students that come to the United States. These are some of the top students in the world. And so it makes it for our American kids much more difficult.
And kids are applying to more schools.
Oh, yes, especially with the pandemic, when they could not visit schools, when they could not form an opinion about a school by going back to campus and seeing peers or seeing, the counselors, admissions counselors. Kids are applying to definitely more schools. It's not unusual for us now to have kids applying to 10, 15 schools, where certainly I would say maybe as little as 10 years ago, the norm was 6, 7, or 8 schools. So that's inflating the numbers at every school. And if we talk to the colleges to find out what their numbers were for past year, and some of them saw increases of 25% in the applicant pool. One particular college, and I'll name it, it was Auburn, literally doubled their applicant pool. So they went from an acceptance rate of 78% down to 39%, which is huge when you really think about it. But so things are changing. Things have changed, and it's become increasingly more difficult to get into the top schools. But then again, there are a lot of really good colleges out there, and we just need to get kids to understand that if they find out if they know what they want to study, that there are a lot of good schools. Once they've identified what they want to study, a lot of good schools where they can go and have really top professors and be prepared to go on to medical school or law school or go on. It doesn't necessarily have to be one of the top 300 schools to get into some of these good law schools or medical schools.
I think there's a perception that educational consultants will push kids to get into the so-called top schools. And how do you fight that perception that there's only a few schools that kids should go to?
It's a hard one because everybody's very label conscious. And so, being admitted to one of the top schools is a super accomplishment for the kid, but also in many cases for the families. And my work with the kids, I always try to find out what they're passionate about, what is it that they really want to study, and then present the kids with as many options as possible, all of which are not necessarily prestigious in name recognition, but that particular department that the kid is interested in may be one of the top 20 or 30 in the country. So yes, the college may not have the name, but the program may have exactly what the kid is looking for, and that to me is the most important thing.
And is it hard to convince the parents that...
Dan, you're setting me up. Yes, it's hard to convince the parents. There's no denying that fact that the kids seem to be more open, but for the family, having their kids go to the right college, in quotation marks, is important. Yes, it does take some convincing.
Can you give me an example of one of these schools that might not have the big name, but that could be right for a particular passion?
I mentioned Auburn, and the reason I was checking into Auburn was because the young man I'm working with is interested in aviation management. He's had a passion about being in the aviation industry all his life. He's considering becoming a pilot as well. But the whole idea of aviation management seems so out of the norm. And I went and checked all the colleges that offer this particular field, and he wants a large college, and Auburn was among those. And it's taken me a little bit to get his parents to agree that they should look at Auburn and consider Auburn. Some of the other names on the list are acceptable, but Auburn was not immediately. Now they're willing to look at it because the program is outstanding. And so there's an example of a college that not many people from this area go to, but this young man very interested and most likely will apply.
So what's been what have been some of the trends? I think at Staples, I've noticed more trend toward big schools.
Yeah.
The Indianas, the Marylands, the Penn States. What's driving that?
I think the kids want to make sure they have a lot of flexibility. Where with the smaller schools, you might not have as many options in terms of changing direction if you decide that what you started in is maybe not the field that you want to pursue. I think that's one part of it. I think the other part also is that the big schools, I'm not so sure the kids are looking for that small community that I'll date myself that I was looking for back then. And I went to a fairly small school of 2,000 students. I'm not so sure they want that small community. Most high schools are 2,000 or more, and every one of my kids will say, I want a school of at least 10,000 or 20,000. And so I think that's part of it as well. I think they're not necessarily looking for that individual relationship with the professors like we had at the small colleges. They want the big experience. I also think that a lot of the perception is that at the larger universities, there are probably more research facilities, and so that may give students more opportunity if they're so inclined. Mm-hmm. So I think that might be part of it too, but I think they just want a big place.
Yeah.
They want big places.
I heard that this year was pretty tough, was brutal, in fact.
It was Waitlist Alley.
And is that a function of numbers or something else?
Numbers. When the numbers at schools have increased, anywhere from 10 to 25% per year over the last 4 or 5 years, it just becomes a matter of no spaces. Lots of outstanding applicants and not enough seats to be filled. Not enough empty seats to be filled. And, last year with the pandemic, a lot of schools took more kids or enrolled more kids than they anticipated. So the freshman enrollment of the class of 21 was larger at quite a few schools. So that meant that this year they were going to make darn sure that it didn't happen again. And so I think that led to a lot of schools creating long wait lists. In our office, I can tell you, we saw more kids ending up with wait list decisions than we've ever seen. So.
How has the pandemic changed what you do?
We don't get to see our kids in person anymore, which is something, having worked with kids all my life in a school setting prior to becoming a consultant, I missed that one-on-one contact with kids. The kids are very comfortable with Zoom, and they've taught an old man like me to be comfortable with it as well. Every now and then I may ask them how to do something technologically on my computer, and they help me out. But it saves the kids a lot of time. It has made it easier for for us to meet when the kids have after-school activities, when they're in sports or when they're in clubs, and they don't get out till 5 o'clock, being able to jump on a Zoom call at 5:30 or 6 o'clock and not having to drive from wherever they live to Westport is a real plus for them. So it's the kids have really taken to it, and the kids are a lot more comfortable with Zoom, although I imagine a lot of them are zoomed out after having virtual school. But we don't see a lot of kids in our office, but we never got to see our kids who lived overseas anyway. We worked with international kids, and all of that was Zoom or Skype back then. So.
And we were talking before, and you mentioned that it's also affected the college visits.
Yes.
And the interviews.
Yes. That I think has been the hardest on the kids. I mean, kids have had to enroll at schools, making decisions without having walked around the campuses, without having, the opportunity to go to the food center or whatever it is, and hang out and see, what the school is all about, to go there and spend an overnight like some of the colleges have allowed kids to do in the past. I mean, I think it made it really hard. The decision making for the kids was based on, chats online, virtual tours, virtual interviews, if they did get them. Not many schools offered interviews this past year. So I think that was the hardest. And I feel for the kids because, that hour and a half, 2 hours on a campus can make a huge difference in how you feel about the school. It's that gut feeling. And I always tell the kids, don't overlook that gut feeling when you're walking around, because you're going to live here for 4 years, So make sure you like it.
Sure.
Yeah.
You said that a lot of your work deals with kids with special needs, therapeutic settings, boarding schools. How is that, what's the landscape there?
The boarding schools actually did quite well during the pandemic because most of them managed to keep their classes going. They kept the boarding students on campus. They isolated those when anybody tested positive. They were isolated and put in a special dorm, but they were able to keep their classes going. None of the boarding schools went to a virtual. They did go virtual for international students or those families who chose to keep their kids home, but they actually were on campus during the whole period. So that was a real plus. And as a result, the boarding schools have seen a significant increase in applicants over the past 2 years. The kids in crisis are more of a negative outcome of the pandemic, in that kids are really struggling, readjusting back to the school settings. The social world in particular has been difficult for kids to reintegrate back into friendships. One of my kids that I'm working with right now really shared with me how, because of her mom being really susceptible, that she did not leave the house for a year, and had every groceries delivered, everything, didn't leave the house for a year, and how it socially really was a negative impact on her. I think there's been a significant increase in anxiety among the kids in terms of stressors. Depression seems to be on a real increase. So the mental health field is swamped right now. I mean, I know many therapists that are listening to this will agree totally. The therapeutic programs are full. There's a wait list. Our kids are struggling, but hopefully, there will be the resources and the support services to help these kids. I mean, you mentioned earlier that at Staples, things seem to be okay and going fine. And obviously that means there's a good support system on the mental health part for the kids as well at the school, so that they're not struggling like so many kids that we see.
So part of what you do is just all these therapeutic schools in Utah, and
Yeah.
you research them, and
We research them, we visit them, we get to know the clinicians and the clinical teams, and once we have students in any of those programs, we are in weekly contact with this program, with the therapist, and with the parents to make sure that we keep following up and know how the treatment is going. And then we work with the students to reintegrate them back into their homes and into their local communities or high schools.
Oh.
Yeah. Or, in some cases, get them ready to go on to college.
So getting back to the whole college admissions process, what are some trends? As you look ahead, what are some things that students and parents should be aware of or thinking about?
I think more so than ever, I think it's important that students take time before they even start the college search process to think about what their strengths are, what their passions, what are the things are that they enjoy doing in life. And then think of fields, academic fields, that may match those passions and interests, because I think it's important for kids to do more of that research. I felt that 15 years ago, you went to college because you were expected to go to college, and you'd figure out in college what you were going to do and what you were going to major in. Not everybody, lots of kids had ideas, but I'll take my own. I started off in engineering and ended up in majoring in German and education. So, I mean, but those change. It was okay to make those changes. College was a place where you went to discover yourself. I think kids are asked to discover themselves earlier now. I think they need to figure out what it is that they want, and then they can apply it. That opens up the college world, I feel, a lot more from just looking for the name schools. If you want to, i.e., the aviation, engineering, or management, it opens up a whole new world to bigger colleges. I mean, I have kids exploring other fields that they may not. I mean, sociology, psychology, things that they might not have thought about before going to college and would have discovered in college. They're now starting to think of those fields earlier, and I think that's good. I think by doing your homework as a student and getting a sense of what it is that you want to study, you can see that there are many good colleges with really strong departments that don't necessarily, the whole college may not rank in the top 300, but that particular field that you are interested in may rank in the top 20 or 25 in the nation. So that to me opens up the search more. And I think we need to open up the search because, as I said before, 10 years, 15 years ago, we would say 8 to 10 colleges. Now it's easily 15, sometimes even 20 colleges that kids apply to, not knowing where the A's are going to come from.
With the cost of college,
Mm-hmm.
and the feeling that it needs to, you need to get a return on your investment. If a kid is interested in music or philosophy or creative writing or something like that, and the parent says, no, I want you to major in economics or finance or something like that. How do you deal with that?
It's a battle. Having raised an artist myself, I know what that's like. It's hard. I mean, sometimes the parents will guide their child in a way that not necessarily seems to be, from my perspective or even the student's perspective, the best or the most appropriate field. But I try to get parents to understand that this is their kid's journey, and that, yes, getting a job after that 4-year journey is important. But at the same time, college, no matter which field you take, teaches you a large number of other things that are not necessarily related to the field that you're studying, which is that teaches you to solve problems, to work cooperatively with people, particularly now and when so many colleges are emphasizing cooperative work. So there's so many things to be gained from college other than just the field that you're studying. And I think, if parents can give their kids at least the leeway to, minor in something that they're interested in, even if they're pursuing business, but if they could also minor in the passion that they have, the music or the philosophy or something, if parents can encourage the kids to, really explore, because that to me is what college is still about in many ways. It's exploring what it is that where are your strengths? How do you best utilize those strengths? And, how can you get the most out of a college that will benefit you 10 years from now?
Might be a strange thing to ask an educational consultant, but do you ever advise kids not to go to college?
Yes, I have. And I must say successfully so. One's a very successful brewer. He said when he came in, he wanted to learn how to become a brewmaster. And his parents said, no, we're not doing that. Lo and behold, we found at that time, this is going back a few years, there were only really 2 schools that were offering a particular major, and he did enroll at one of them. And by the middle of his sophomore years, he had already created two blue ribbon brews. Another one was a young man who came in and says, no, I don't want to go to college. I'm already under contract with a game design company, and I want to pursue it. He and I worked, and he ended up getting his business degree over a period of 8 years while working for this game design company, and probably has his master's now. I lost track of him after he got his undergraduate degree, but he did it as a adult student, and so it took him 8 years, but he got it. But meanwhile, he was gainfully employed, no pun intended.
Wow. Fascinating stuff. As you look back on your career, are there 1 or 2 examples where you look at a kid and look at, besides the couple that you mentioned, where you say, this is why I do what I do?
Yeah, but it takes me back in a way to the kind of work that I was doing as director of admissions at an all-girls boarding school, which is, I always looked for the passion in the kid, and took some students that did not do well in the schooling. Their record wasn't fantastic, but there was something in their personality and how they expressed themselves or how they talked about themselves, and that made me say, okay, this kid is going to be great, and I want to be part of it. And, did it always work? No, but did it work 90% of the time? Yes. And it's being able to recognize in young people the spark that they have, that inner passion, or what it is, whatever it is that says, okay, this kid's got something, and I want my school to be part of it, or I want to be part of it as a college counselor, or as somebody who's helping this kid find his or her next place, and that's, to me, is the rewarding part of it. Every kid that walks in the door is unique. Every kid brings a new approach, a new way of thinking, a different way of thinking to the process, and watching them succeed is really what it's all about. I mean, Dan, I've known you for many, many years. You're a teacher, you're a coach. I know you know what it's like to be passionate and watch the passion in the kids and the joy that the kids get out of it. So it makes it worthwhile, right? Yeah.
So I guess the last question is one piece of advice for parents, one piece for kids.
Okay. For the parents, I think they're going to be tied together, and I might be repeating myself a little. I think it's very important for parents to hear their kids, to listen to what it is that they think they may want to pursue. For the kids, I really think it's important to take that time to explore who you are as an individual, how you think you can utilize your strengths, and how in a way you can avoid your weaknesses too. I mean, there's no sense in beating your head against the wall by pursuing a major in math when you're horrible at math. So, I mean, explore your strengths, see what, recognize what, who you are as a person, and then go on and pursue a field where you can use those strengths.
Great.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Dan.
Diederik Van Renessee from Steinbrecher Educational Advisors. Appreciate your thoughts. Appreciate all you do for the very stressed out kids and parents of this area. And I learned a lot.
Thank you, Dan.
You bet.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. And it's good to be on with you in particular.